Hello and welcome. I'm Shane O'Connor. That guy there is Adrian Lacey. This is the Bull and Specs podcast, isn't it, Adrian?
It sure is. We're still keeping the mystery of why it's called Bull and Specs going, because we'll just milk that for as long as we can, I think.
Yeah. If you want to tell me any time, obviously in confidence, I wouldn't tell anybody else, but no, we'll be fine. If you've not joined us before, we chat about some of the stuff that's happened in the week's news, and we also give you a bit of an insight into some of the stuff that we've been doing, don't we, as well?
Yes, and I cannot compete with your seismic week, so I won't even attempt to. But you go first. Everything else I've done, or indeed will ever do, is in the shade of what you've done.
Let me just call on my glamorous assistant to tell you what I've done this week, because this week I actually made one of these. Well, I say I made one of these. I did have a little bit of help in the form of my beautiful wife Angelina, but this is Frank, my son, who as we speak, he's 6 days old.
Wow.
Thank you.
Oh, right on cue. Lovely.
And he's looking at born performer, and he's only just started as well. So, so he's having a bit of a kip at the moment. So, what I'll do, let me have a quick look. If you're not watching on YouTube, obviously you're not going to see any of this, but you will have heard him speak. So I'm just going to hand him back to Angelina, and he's going to have a little continuation of his kip. He's well fed, well watered. But yeah, our son came into the world. So, bit of seismic is not the word, is it? Really, I guess.
There is no word big enough, but congratulations to both of you. Does your glamorous assistant lean in at all just before she goes? You've given her the nod.
She's got Angelina. Just stick your head in. Stick your head in and say.
Just so people can see the person who did the real work.
Yeah, this is who did the real work. Oh,
sorry,
hello. We've got a photo like that actually. Me holding Frank like that, and Angelina's head is coming in sideways. I've got to tell you though, being there for the birth. And it's kind of made me think whether I might end up doing a vlog about this actually, because it was nobody ever prepares you for it, mate. Nobody ever, I remember doing biology at school and all the rest of it. Nobody ever gives you any idea of what it's going to be like or what's going to happen. Or
do you think they could though? To be fair,
I have this issue all the way through. Is I did say that Angelina became pregnant and I became invisible. And it's not everybody, but most people that we met in the NHS talk solely to her, and you do kind of feel a little bit excluded in that sense. But so I don't know. They explained a lot to her, and they said to her, "Okay, this is going to happen." And at some point as well, when they're talking, I won't get too graphic, but they're talking about how the delivery will happen, and if things don't happen as they want it to, the medical procedures like injections and cutting and that kind of thing, I thought was a bit, they could have described a little less, to be quite honest with you, because she kind of got a bit panicky about, as you would, right, now I'm just going to cut you with this huge knife, I won't be a moment. Do you know what I mean? It's like I don't need that explained, thanks very much, really. So that I thought, was a little bit too much explanation, I guess, in a way. But yeah, I think they could do more at school, I think. But I don't know, we were at school a different generation, weren't we? And I kind of think either they didn't tell me, or it's three things. They didn't tell me, I wasn't paying attention, or I've forgotten it. It's one of those three, really. Having said that, to be there, to see it, the most difficult thing is somebody that you love being in that much pain. And you're useless, really. You are a complete spare part. That's really quite difficult. I found that very difficult. But then the euphoria that you feel afterwards, in that, knowing that he's okay and that she's okay, and people talk about this feeling, and you think, whatever. And they say you'll never know anything like it. It's incredible, but it is. It was just amazing. It really was. But yeah, and very emotional. And you feel like your whole life's changed. It's almost like at that point, life will never be the same, because it won't, will it? Life will never be the same again, because it's everything is complete. We had a problem here because we've moved to this cottage, and it's a bit. I was going to use the word decrepit, but it's a bit old. It's not that bad, but we had a problem with the heating. And ordinarily, just the two of us, we'd have gone out or wouldn't have bothered or, said, put a hat on and a coat on or whatever. But, of course, everything changes now. I went out to Tesco yesterday, and shopping's going to be difficult because so many people, and you don't realise so many people come up to you and go, oh, he's beautiful, what's his name, how old is he, and all that kind of stuff. And I just said, I don't know, I found him on aisle 6 just by the cornflakes. I thought he was with you. So, yeah, but I'm really trying to. I'm really fighting at the moment, trying to not become one of those people who's a child bore, and all they ever do is talk about their youngster. But it's hard not to at the moment. It's pretty amazing, pretty special. So that was my week anyway, pretty well.
Well, no, I will indulge you on, because I wouldn't use the term bore, but the thing is, he has got to twist the axis of your world, hasn't he? Because you can't just ignore him now.
That's normal, isn't it? I think if he didn't feel like that, I think he'd be a bit weird. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I'm surprised that he hasn't upset your world so much that you might have said to me in the week, do you know, can we have a week off or two? Well, and I would have understood.
Do you know, there is an element as well that you kind of, in the back of your mind, you think, life has to go on, things have to be done. You want some kind of normality because you think that life is not going to stop for the boy. So there is that in the back of your mind as well. It's like we went out yesterday. And one of the reasons we went out, because Angelina hadn't been out. She'd been in hospital for a couple of days because they were a bit worried about him at first. But he's, touch wood, he's fine. And she was kind of going, getting a bit of cabin fever. Really, I think was the problem. So we said, "Well, come on, let's go out." And of course, now when you go out, you have to take big bags of stuff with you, and
it's a military operation, isn't
it? carrying equipment. But I mean, the staff have been they were so wonderful, and everybody has said to, because he's got quite chubby cheeks. I don't know where he gets that from. I mean,
no idea. I'm
so sylph-like, aren't I? I can't understand why.
Full head of hair. That really is a mystery.
He looks a lot like the milkman we used to have at our old address. Funnily enough, I can't really figure that one out. But every midwife and nurse and person that came to see Angelina and saw him said, "Oh, look at those cheeks. Oh, he's so beautiful. He's so lovely." And then they go, "How heavy was he?" Because he was 9 pounds when he was born, which is
that's eye-watering.
Which again, I don't know where he gets that from. But yeah, so and somebody said, one of the nurses said, I thought you had swapped out a 3-month-old for your newborn kind of thing, because he's quite long, he's quite tall, or however you say it when they're that age. But yeah, 9 pounds it's enough to make it stung. I'll tell you that, it certainly stung.
And that was just you watching.
I tried not to get too upset and scream too much, but yeah. I was trying to make jokes and stuff like Angelina got the gas and air, and because that's all she had. She didn't have an epidural or anything like that. So the only pain relief she had was like the Entonox and gas and air, and she's on this thing. And I
sounds
imagine
like Darth Vader.
I imagined a sketch actually. I imagined that you follow the tube out, and it goes outside into the car park, and there's a bloke there with a giant bouncy castle.
Lots of kids on.
She's doing this, but she got it in her mouth like that. She's going like this, and to try and lighten the mood a little bit. And I said, that's the worst sax solo I've ever heard. Nothing
didn't work. Not a titter.
Not a titter in the house. No, but anyway.
And you wonder why all the staff address her and not you. Well, that's your answer, Shane. Shane O'Connor, Joker to the stars.
I think it could be. It could have been a problem maybe, but I tried to rein it in a bit. But anyway, enough of that, because I don't want to become a baby bore. Tell me about and it's not a competition, don't forget, because I remember the week you had the hole in the Speedos. I mean, I was floundering that week, so it's not a competition. But how did you get on? What did you do this week?
Well, I completed my dark secret is I have a solo podcast in addition to this one. Am I allowed to mention a rival podcast?
It's great. I love it. Yeah, I listen regularly. I think it's brilliant. The London podcast. It's awesome.
You are very kind. You are very kind. Just went. I hate this term, but you have to use the terminology, otherwise no one understands what you're talking about. It dropped the other day.
Right.
I'm not talking about Frank, although it was a painful birth, I have to say. Yeah. It's the biggest, most complicated, and the podcast out of all of them, and I've been doing it for over 18 months now, that took the longest, but also very, very satisfying to finally get it up there. It's a profile of a frontman of the Broadwicks, a guy who's been in show business for about 5 decades now, Norman Castle.
Norman Castle,
doubtless heard of.
I hadn't, and this is I've listened to the podcast. I've not heard of it. Where do I get to? Were they a 60s band originally, or?
Well, originally, yeah, the Broadwicks sort of formed in the 60s. The truth is, they only had one hit.
Yeah.
But it's fair to call them a one-hit wonder, because I think it's a wonderful track called Sugar and Spice. Not to be confused with any other bands. There is a similar. Was it the Seekers? Anyway,
I think it could be. Yeah.
Yeah. And they got into a bit of a legal wrangle, and Norman, the front man, fell out with the co-writer Neville Rice, and then Peggy Babcock, the bassist, had her own issues. I mean, the biggest wonder is how she put up with Neville and Norman, between you and me. But a fascinating thing, and he's always rebranded himself. He's always tried to stay ahead of the curve. So when 60s guitar pop gave way to something a bit more progressive, the band disbanded, and he got into more sort of experimental stuff. There's an album called Beyond the Norm, which goes down the sitar route.
Yeah, a bit like George Harrison, as you pointed out.
Well, indeed,
podcast,
yes,
isn't it? Yeah,
yes. And there were some links, so they were involved in the Fabs world. And in fact, it's George Harrison's sitar that he borrowed and took it in a cab across town.
That's right.
So that's quite something. Whether it's the most accessible album with him reading from well, I don't want to ruin it, and people should listen to the podcast.
They should.
Yeah. How long can we sustain this before I confess it's actually a spoof? If it's not immediately obvious from his name, Norman Castle.
Well, the one that I was with you with Norman Castle. The one that got me was the bass player Peggy Babcock, because I thought, well, I bet nobody ever says that 3 times, do they?
Do you know where it comes from, that name?
And that's where it isn't it? Well, I know it's a tongue twister, isn't it?
It is. So people in the know, but I think it might not go outside this country, because actually, although the actress playing Peggy was born in Liverpool and raised for what was it? Until she was about 11. She then was raised in Canada. People might just have heard of her, but I don't think she didn't react when I said her character name. So I thought, well, maybe out in Canada, North America, they don't use it because I've used it in vocal workshops.
Well, it is. Canada obviously was a British colony, wasn't it? Or is it still a British territory? Isn't it? I can't remember.
We have to be careful, don't we?
Yeah, I don't know, but you know what I mean.
They've got their own government.
What I'm saying is there is a strong British link. So maybe
the Queen is head of state. That's it. Yeah.
So maybe Peggy Babcock. I can't even say it once.
Peggy Babcock.
I swear I haven't touched a drop this morning, Ossifer.
Anyway, we should credit. I mean, the star of the show is Norman Castle. He's played by Russ Thomas, who's done a lot of work for me in other London podcasts.
He's fabulous.
He is. He's a brilliant mimic. And I should say, since you've generously allowed me to promote the show, the website is londonpodcast.net. The easiest way to find it on iTunes is actually to search my name, Adrian Lacey.
Okay.
Lacey, as it turns out, because there's so many podcasts with a London link. But I'm delighted to say that I directed a Hollywood actress as Peggy Babcock. Some people will, hopefully many people will know.
You didn't say who it was. Are you allowed to say who it was?
I am going to say Kim Cattrall,
awesome.
Who it's rather lovely to be able to say. She's been directed by Roman Polanski and other big name Hollywood directors.
Yeah, but
and
not
there's
as
this
well.
bloke. Well, I wasn't going to say that. As you know, I never blow my own trumpet. But I sat there thinking, I'm a bloke from Watford, some bald bloke with glasses from Watford, and I've got the cheek to direct Kim Cattrall, who she's best known as Samantha in Sex and the City. Actually, what she deserves to be best known for is what she's subsequently done, Sensitive Skin, which is on Netflix. And there, she carries it. She is very definitely the star of the show. And you can't do that and hide at the same time. So you really have to have the talent. And I have to say, sorry, I'm going on probably talking longer than you talking about bringing new life into the world. But I feel I've done something similar with the Norman Castle tribute. What was I going to say? Well, it's that you could see the star quality with her because she picks up the script and says, what kind of accent do you want for Peggy Babcock? And I'm thinking, well, New York. And then it's, which part of New York and which part of the social strata and all of that. Yeah. And eventually, between us, she offered Patti Smith, the great 70s rocker. And she borrowed my phone for a bit, so I'm never going to wipe the phone because it's got celebrity fingerprints on. And she just wanted a bit of Patti Smith on YouTube just to listen. And I kid you not, within 10 minutes, she's got Patti Smith down, Pat, if you'll pardon the pun.
Awesome.
And just the speed and the seriousness with which she does it, but also the lightness of touch, because, of course, it's a comedy character. But you could see why she is where she is, so that's a delight.
Fantastic. And the other way I just mentioned as well, because I just go to your website and just pick it up from there as well. So adrianlacey.com, are you?
There is a link from there. So again, Lacey with an E.
Yeah. So it's just the easy, just a way, and you can see all past episodes and all sorts of stuff on iTunes as well. But the London podcast, well worth a listen. You've done some great stuff on there, not least the episode where you, which was one of the things that invigorated me to get back in touch and say, come on, we've got to work together, was the one where you interviewed yourself, which I just love. I think he's great. But unfortunately, I don't like either the interviewer or the interviewee, but you can't have everything, can you?
I've got no time for either of them, frankly, and I know them far too well. And the thing is, it is true that when you start talking to yourself, that is the first sign of madness. Yeah. So for me to put it out there in the public domain it's like saying, not only am I mad, but I want everyone to know I'm mad.
Two for the price of one as well, isn't it? You get to listen to this podcast, and you also get to listen to recommendations for other ones as well. AdrianLacey.com. Go along and have a listen, but have a listen to this episode because you'll learn all about Norman Castle.
So here on Bull and Specs, once we've got the last week out of the way, if indeed either of us can, on this of all weeks, we take a mull over a couple of stories in the news. And here's a nice controversy. As soon as you mention the word Trump, of course, it's impossible to sit on the fence, really. But what I'm interested in here, and it's been in and out of the news actually for some weeks now, but it's back in as it seems to be a bit more firmed up, is about the Donald visiting the UK. Are you kind of across this one?
Yeah,
they won't actually say the date yet, but they are actually... They're not denying it's going to happen. Sorry, after you.
No, I was going to say, in as much as it's a rolling story, isn't it, Adrian? I mean, I'm across it in as much as it's going to happen. They want, there is a desire for it to happen, kind of thing, but there is a lack of desire to put a firm date on it. Is that? Do you think that's because people know, the government knows there is strong opposition to this?
I would guess, yes, and I would guess a lot of it is to do with security. I don't envy anyone in that industry, from the top to the bottom, about planning for it. And obviously, I suppose if they give the date away too soon, then that gives people more chance to plan anything untoward, be it from a mild protest to something much more sinister. I had an outbreak of reasonableness when I thought about it this morning, because I could see the arguments for disinviting him. Is that the term? Because he was invited virtually from the beginning of the Theresa May presidency, if I can call it that.
Yeah.
And very hard to disinvite or uninvite someone once you've invited them, but not least, when they happen to be leader of the free world. And I thought, well, I had some big concerns about it, and I don't for a moment think I'm unique in that. But actually, you can't not have the President of the United States, of whichever political complexion, whichever holder of the office, and especially you could argue post-Brexit when it's more important to be more outward-looking, you can't not have them visit.
There is, to me, there's a worry. I mean, and I know these very often are extremes, but the left of politics in this country, in the United States, has a tendency, if they don't get their own way, to have the mother of all tantrums. And we've seen this. I don't know if you've seen, there's a guy that I follow that I think he's quite an interesting speaker called Ben Shapiro in the United States, who wanted to talk at Berkeley University in California. And they practically burnt the bloody place down, simply because they didn't want him to speak. Now, this guy is a right wing. I'm not talking far right wing. He's a Jewish guy. He's quite reasonable. He's got very, very definite views on abortion, which people don't like him for. I.e., he believes that he's pro-life kind of thing. But basically, he wouldn't get on with left-leaning sympathisers, and so in order for him not to speak there, they set fire to the campus. And I don't know if you saw that in the United States overnight there was was it a Senate seat that was lost by the Republicans?
Oh yes, Mr. Moore, who was of dubious character because of all these accusations of sexual assault. Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, somebody put on Twitter and they said this is all the Republican voters rioting in the streets because Mr. Moore lost his seat, and I showed a picture of an empty street. But there is that kind of, do you know what I mean? That from the people who are passionate about the left of politics seem to be a lot more aggressive about their protection of what they believe is right than people of the right do, unless you go far right kind of thing and into the extremes. And maybe that's far left. This, to me, this is what I worry about the Trump thing. Is it just people? A minority of people getting quite vocal and saying, yes, we shouldn't have this, and is that right? I mean, personally, I haven't got a view. He's not my president. It's not my country. It matters not to me. You look at some of the people they've invited in the past, and you kind of think, on the basis of him being, a nasty person or whatever. I mean, he's way down the list, isn't he, Adrian? When you think about it, you think of some of the people that we've invited on state visits.
Yeah, dictators. Yeah, Mugabe and the Ceausescus from Romania in days gone by.
I mean, like people who actually perpetrated genocide on their own citizens. I mean, look at even China. You look at when you invite the China. The head of state of China, whoever it happens to be, you look at their history of human rights is abysmal, isn't it? Internationally accepted as abysmal, and yet we're inviting it. So we're saying that Donald Trump, because of all the many controversies, and let's face it, there are so many. I mean, it's almost caricature-esque, isn't it now?
Yes.
But you like you're saying he's worse than the Ceausescu's. Is a little bit offensive in itself, in a way.
And the thing is, he does have a right to his own life. And I wouldn't want, in terms of some of the things people want to do to him, I think he's got to be beaten at the ballot box. And as you said, I mean, he's not our president anyway.
No.
I'm slightly drifting off topic here, but I was in the States in the run-up to Trump getting elected, just 12 days before the election. I couldn't resist. I was in Canada and I just popped over, like you do, on a 6-hour flight.
Yeah.
And remind yourself how big North America is. It's not John O'Groats to Land's End. It's a little bit more than that. But I just had to get a try, however fleetingly and however inadequately, I had to get a little flavour. And the thing that shocked me was the indifference. My host, Airbnb host, I was on a budget there, but it was a nice house, actually, not dissing him. But he had no interest in either of the candidates, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump.
No.
And coming from Britain, where our media suggests it's utterly polarised and people are passionate one way or the other, to have someone who said, actually they're as bad as each other.
Yeah.
It really was an eye opener.
I have to say, and it's more complex than I'm making it sound. But the one thing I do agree with Trump on is this idea of fake news, and I wouldn't suggest that fake news is all done to. I mean, even done on purpose in some cases. I think it's just poor news in some ways. But I think that there is a case to answer that, as you say, the way that it's portrayed. You would believe it's one thing, and the way when you talk to people in the street, the reality is something quite. And to me, that's fake. And I think that's a really valid point. I had a conversation. This is when Tony Blair was the Prime Minister in the UK. Adrian, I had a conversation with a woman in Florida, I think it was. We were talking politics with her and her husband and a friend of mine. And we were saying about, this guy was saying about Tony Blair, this, and what he thought and all the rest of it. And about 25 minutes into this conversation, it's like something out of Monty Python. 25 minutes into this conversation, his wife turned to me and she said, "Honey, who's Tony Blair?" And to me, that sums up exactly what you say. Not only are they disconnected with their own politics. I mean, as far as isolationism isn't in it, is it really? But again, not for any isolationism for isolationism's sake, but because they're just disconnected with the whole thing. And they really got. If you asked them to point the UK out on a map, they wouldn't really have a clue. A lot of Americans, and I'm not faulting them for that, because their country is so vast and so complex and so disparate and diverse that if you spent a week in Alaska and a week in Florida, you might as well be in different lands almost. So I kind of get why that is, but you're right, there is a disconnection with international and national and local politics, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're scaling things back by the sound of things in terms of the proposal for Trump coming over here.
Right.
It's sounding like possibly February. They're committing as far as it seems to early 2018, so at that end of the year rather than the other end. And also people are putting two and two together because there's a new American embassy in the Nine Elms part of London, so it seems too much of a coincidence that that's due to open at the beginning of next year.
Right.
But it's not going to be all sort of flunkies and audiences with the Queen all the time. I mean, there's some phrase, just scrolling down on an article I was reading, she's busy with, what was it, other things anyway. It was a bit more specific than that. And I thought she could probably find 5 minutes to say hello and howdy to Donald Trump. But yes, there won't be the by the sound of things, it doesn't sound like coaching horses across the Mall and all of that. That would just be inviting bigger protests.
Let's face it, and this is where I find the interest. The left of politics in this country now is so conflicted because they're all saying, "Oh, Trump shouldn't come," and they're all going, "What a wonderful thing the royal family is," and you're thinking, "Hang on a second, how do your beliefs get skewed to that kind of level that you feel like that?" But the royal family, let's be honest, Adrian, there's no way they're not going to muff up what they've got, are they? They've got it good at the moment with the youngsters having kids like there's no tomorrow. So they've got the British. If you think how they were 15 years ago. Or 20 years ago, maybe even longer than that, with the Diana thing and all the rest. They're not going to do anything to muff that up, are they? There's no way that they're going to start going, "Oh, hello, Mr. Trump," if they think there's a sniff that the British people are not going to be on their side. They're not going to ruin that by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I don't think we're going to see Prince Charles inviting Donald Trump out for a McDonald's or something like that. Although that would be intriguing, wouldn't it? And the security detail.
Do you know the thing I would be curious about is I mean, I don't know who pays the bill for it. If it's a state visit, presumably we foot the bill, do we? In the same way that if Theresa May went to the United States on an official visit, then they would foot the bill with it. Is that part of the argument for people that don't want him to come?
I think I think that's one thing, that it's coming out of our tax pounds. Although when the presidents come over, I think it must have been Bill Clinton's day. I read a bit of the small print. Do you know how many people he brings over with him? And I can't imagine Donald Trump will have any fewer than this. 1,000 people.
Yeah. Well, he brings his helicopter, don't you?
And the cars as well, yeah. They wouldn't trust our cars.
No.
I think these aren't ordinary cars, are they?
They bring 2 Marine Ones with them, which are the helicopters. I think they bring Marine One and a backup
and a spare. Yeah.
I got to tell you, I was in Washington, and I was lucky enough when Obama was president. I was lucky enough, not that I had any time for Obama. I thought he was a dreadful president, but I was lucky enough to be in Washington when he was in the White House, and we went to the White House that day, and he turned up. And I have never seen a security operation like it. And this is just to travel locally. I think he travelled from Edwards. I think he'd been to the Air Force Base and was coming back or whatever. I mean, the convoy was like 15 cars. And I looked it up afterwards. And there's a radar car, and there's a the armoured car, and there's this vehicle and that. And it's just amazing. I mean, to see him on the move, he's just like nothing you'll ever see. It's just like the excesses of the most elaborate Hollywood movie, really. But yeah, you're right. Yeah. I mean, they stick the helicopters in the plane. I mean,
they must laugh at us. I mean, Theresa May's only got a mini moke.
Yeah, she came on the bus.
And a bloke with a water pistol.
Although they've upgraded to a catapult now, haven't they? But I mean, you think about it, and I don't know whether numbers, because you kind of think, well, the Royal Protection Officers and the political protection officers, we'd like to think are more highly trained than anybody else in the world. So maybe you don't need hundreds of people, but 1,000 people. I fully believe that. It's incredible. It really is. I mean, Air Force One, the whole thing is just amazing in itself, isn't it? Really, but So who knows whether he'll come? What do you reckon? Let's take a punt on it. I don't think it'll happen.
Really,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. 95, 99% sure. Because of the invite, although you could say we could even have, the way things are going, we could even have another general election, couldn't we, and a different Prime Minister by then.
Yeah, we could be a Marxist country by then, couldn't we? We'll be inviting Raul Castro and Vladimir Putin. Those
all things are possible. There was a time when I would have thought you were joking, but
I'm not.
Imagine your son being raised under Putin. That would be an interesting thing. He'd start writing Dostoevsky novels and Solzhenitsyn style diaries.
We can do a whole podcast on how I worry for the future of my son if you want. I'll write a book on that, But
why do you think I don't have children? I've been too worried sick about the children I haven't had.
Yeah.
That's how bad it is.
Yeah, I know.
But the thing is, yes, that is another podcast for another day. But there is no ceiling on what you could worry about. That's the thing about being alive, isn't it?
The one thing I do worry about with Trump, though, is will he do visits to places? I mean, how do they entertain him? Will he do Alton Towers? and like, if he goes on the Thunder Looper at Alton Towers, what the hell's that going to do to his hair? That's the thing that kind of although that sort of stuff worries me. Will he?
He's got a whole car full of wig specialists.
He probably brings a theme park with him anyway, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I'll get mine out. It's on the plane.
I did hear about Michael Jackson at the end of a tour. He hired out the whole of Disneyland for all his staff working on the tour to go mental, and it was overnight as well. I mean, what kind of trip that would have been?
This is way off topic, and I don't know if I can say who it is, but I guess I can. We heard a story of somebody we know, and they got their wedding booked at Disney, I think it was. I might get half a story. I won't mention who it is on air just in case I've got it completely wrong. But I think they got their wedding booked to Disney, and they got a phone call saying, will you change the date? And they went, "That's stupid. It's and they said, we've got a client who wants to close the place and rent it out." And they went, "No." And they came back and they said, "We'll pay for your whole wedding if you change the date." And they went, "No." And they said, "All right." They came back again, "We'll pay for your wedding and we'll take your family on holiday and your honeymoon and everything." No. And they came back and they said, "They'll pay for your wedding, our client will do all the costs for everybody, honeymoon as well, and we'll pay off your mortgage."
Wow.
And they went, "What date would you like us to have?" And that's so that's the power of money, isn't it? But that's way off topic. So I don't know. So if he does go to,
I was going to say, I was sold at the idea of having some bunting on the house.
Well, we said the same.
I'm easily bought.
We're so cheap. We'd have just done it on the first offer that we got. We said, "Can we have canapes in that as well?" Is that? But yeah, way off topic. But if Trump comes, maybe if he does, they'll close Alton Towers, so we'll never get to see his hair anyway, would we? I guess.
More's the pity.
Our final story then for episode 10 of the Bull and Specs podcast takes us back to our school days in a way, Adrian, I guess, really, because it's the story of a young man called Keaton Jones who was, we were led to believe, was being bullied. It's one of these where a young kid's bullied and then lots of celebrities on social media start to rally around and send him messages and all that sort of stuff. It said they got a response from Chris Evans, and I thought, well, how would he know, an American kid? But then, of course, it's the American Chris Evans, isn't it? The movie star, not the ginger cornflake that we have here, or whatever he's called these days.
Ginger cornflake. That's a callback to Dave Lee Travis.
Yeah, I wonder if I should send that to him and see if, because cornflakes are kind of ginger anyway. It doesn't really work.
Aren't they? Yeah, I'm not sure he wants the association. But anyway, yeah, carry on.
But so you've seen this one, haven't you, as well? I mean, before we talk about him particularly, these are kind of multi-layered stories, kind of why I like it. But it prompts the question: isn't this just what you expect to have at school? Because I remember kids at school who would, I don't know, pick on me, I suppose is the word. You know, and you had to stand up for yourself or whatever, or you didn't, or whatever the case may be. But so I suppose nowadays you go, oh, that's bullying. Have you got similar experiences? I guess you have, haven't you? That's part of school, isn't it?
It is, especially when you're a softie like me, because that's what they can pick up on. But should I tell my story quickly now? Or,
yeah, go on. Yeah.
Well, this is a funny one. It says more about me and my warped priorities. I remember on one occasion, in fact, I think there were very few occasions when I was hit, but it did get physical a couple of times. And on one occasion, I was actually in the school building. This guy, it just slapped me about the face. That's not, physical contact can get much, much worse.
Yeah.
So actually, when I hear about other things, I think, well, I got off quite lightly. He didn't put ham down my trousers, which this poor Keaton Jones got. But
I still don't understand the significance of that. But go on.
No, maybe that's a cultural subtext we're not privy to. Anyway, as a result of this, I went out. There were two entrances and exits to the school, and I normally the quickest way to walk home was to go out the tradesman's entrance at the back. And on this one occasion, unusually for me, I went out the opposite end to avoid this bully guy. And what really upset me was it happened to be the day of a family funeral. I didn't go to funerals at that age. I was about 10. This is junior school. But my uncle had come over. And sorry, this is much too much too much.
I'm sketching it out here. I'm just so. Hang on a second. Where was
anyway? You can tell why I never get asked out to the pub, because I can't tell a yarn, or I can't do it in before closing time. Anyway, we didn't have a car. He had a car. For the one occasion of that, my entire period at that school, and you have to understand, I loved cars. I was mad about them. And I missed out on a lift from my uncle. And that hurt more than being slapped about the chops.
Right.
That's my story.
I thought you were going to say, and then I got slapped about the chops, and he said, you smell a wee and your mother doesn't love you. And to be honest with you, I expected better from a maths teacher.
You can have that one anyway.
But
have you been crafting that story?
No, I'm not. And I'm not making light of bullying, because this is, it's serious.
No, absolutely not.
But this trend really worries me, and let me tell you why. And this is the thing that I first thought of, and this isn't the first story this has happened to. It really worried me because I thought, okay, this kid, Snoop Dogg and Chris Evans and all these other people have sent him messages on social media and said, we're with your kid and all the rest of it. But what happens to the kid who it happens to, and the stars don't come out for them? They then have self-esteem issues where they think, well, what's the matter with? Why didn't anyone come to my rescue? And the consequences of that could be far worse. I don't think celebrities should be getting involved in this personally. I don't think they should. They should do that. I don't think it's and I don't think they should be trying to do it on social media. I don't think it's the forum to do it.
Would it be any different if they said, good on you, Keaton, be brave and all of that, and anyone else reading this who is bullied? Because would that be enough?
I don't know. I think the name check, it's like the kind of thing, isn't it? It's like if you start to name check people, the people that you don't name check are the ones that are, well, what's the matter? Why didn't he? Do you know, like if somebody stood up at a wedding and said, I'd like to thank, and you're there, and I'd like to thank Brian and Sue and Mary and Fred and George. And it reads out the names of the entire people in the room, apart from Adrian. Yeah. You think, what the hell was that? What have I done to deserve that kind of thing? And it could just be an omission. So just by, an act of omission, you could do far more damage, couldn't you? Really, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm a bit torn. I mean, because I think kids are probably much smarter than I was at their age, and I think they might get the feeling that Chris Evans of either variety, Cornflake or Film Star, or Snowflake. I mean, let's include everyone. Speaking of a fully paid up Snowflake myself, they are helping create a culture in which this is unacceptable. Because I suppose I would have felt quite isolated. We had none of that. I mean, kids today watching and listening to this Bull and Specs podcast won't know that culturally it has changed hugely in terms of what people talk about. And I know talk is cheap, which is why stars love Twitter and love tweeting support, because there's no harm in it. There's no immediate obvious loss for them in doing it. But one of the things about that's so hurtful about bullying is the feeling of isolation, isn't there? The loneliness. So I don't know. I think even if someone just tweets something, there's some kind of symbolism in that. I know kids won't necessarily even use the word or think of the word symbolism, but there's something about feeling, I feel a bit less alone now. Do you not think there's that element to it?
Do you know what worries me as well is that the idea of bullying. You were talking about being slapped across the face and all that sort of stuff. And there was a story. There was another kid, a British kid called Ollie something or other. I can't remember. And I think his dad put on Twitter a strange request. Anyone famous or well known who could send Ollie a positive 9th birthday message? The bully keeps saying to him that he has stuff that's bigger and better or experiences stuff more often. Like my dad's bigger than your dad, I've got a better pair of trainers. And I'm thinking, that's bullying. Are we serious now? Is that really what we've become and this like Jake Humphries and all these people were tweeting him and saying, like Bart Simpson sent him a tweet saying, have a great birthday. And I just felt so uncomfortable with the thing, because I thought, I don't think that's bullying. Like when, the way kids interact and go, oh no, I think you're rubbish, I think you're rubbish, your dad's rubbish or whatever. That's not bullying. B, you're actually getting this kid to believe that he lives in this sort of fairyland where celebrities will come to his rescue, which ain't going to happen either. And the whole thing just left me feeling completely uncomfortable, Adrian. I just thought, that's sends out the wrong message on so many levels. I can't even begin to tell you, because I think, part of what makes you who you are and what you are is overcoming difficult times. Now, I don't know about you, but I can categorise most of school as difficult times. I never thought.
Really?
I never thought. I mean, don't get me wrong. It wasn't. I wasn't bullied, constantly or anything like that. But I never look back at school and think, oh, what a great time that was. It was something I endured. It was something I put up with. Something I had to get through and got over. And I think I just worry about this next generation when they're adults, and somebody says, I don't like your jumper, that's horrible. What are they going to burst into tears? Steve Jobs was quite an interesting character, because he used to burst into tears all the while. I think it was something to do with his upbringing. But he'd be in a meeting and people would say, Steve, this isn't working or whatever, and he couldn't have an argument. He'd just cry and run out the room.
Gosh.
And is that the kind of, you know what I mean? This kind of thing just, to me, perpetuates that sort of behaviour. Am I being too hard?
Well, I do worry how I'm coming across, because I think I might be speaking with a forked tongue here. I mean, if I laid into celebrity culture, you'd have to edit out the first thing we were talking about.
Yeah.
And I have to say I was a bit chuffed. Sorry to bring it back to me, but when Kim Cattrall retweeted my tweet about my wee podcast, admittedly she's in it, and of course her man's in it.
Huge validation, isn't it?
It goes to 215,000 followers.
Yeah.
Can I say she's got 1,000 followers for each of my poultry? Some. So I think a lot of this is status, isn't it? And we're very deferential creatures. Where do you fit into the social class? Are you upper class, middle class, lower class, working class, whatever you call it?
I know
bullying
my
feeds
place.
into that, doesn't it? I get a pain in the back of my neck, frankly. Why do you think I'm wearing the scarf? I look up to you, Shane.
Do you know? And that's the problem, is that I it's the same thing about when they made universities more accessible to kids who wouldn't ordinarily have gone to university. The problem with that is you can funnel them all in, but you can't squeeze them out the funnel at the other end, because we can't we can't all be bankers or solicitors or what. There are people who have to do other jobs in life, aren't there? And there are people who you end up with road sweepers with degrees, and that's the problem with this kind of it's this thing about this. One of the problems is that parents reinforce this and say to their kids that you are special and you can achieve anything that you want, and that's not true. I mean, that just simply isn't true. I'm not going to tell my son.
Yeah, but what message are you going to give Frank, though?
I'm going to teach him about hard work and about how to. My parents never had that conversation with me about the harder you work at school, the nicer the car is. Do you know what I mean? That correlation between that. That's that kind of thing, I suppose. But I suppose I'm going to have to play it by ear as it comes along. But I'm not going to be telling him that he's some kind of superstar and that he can do anything that he wants. I mean, I can say, look, if you want to do this, then you have to do that. But I'm not going to say. Because if it turns out that he quite clearly isn't bright enough to be a barrister at the Old Bailey, then the sooner we all accept that and say, actually, though, he'd make a damn fine heating engineer or an absolutely fantastic nurse, or do you know what I mean? You gotta work with what you've got. And that's the point. Is that I'm hopeless at maths. I'm absolutely appalling at maths. And one of the things, if I had my life again, I'd like to have been working in aviation. I'd love to be, a pilot or something like that. But I know that no matter how hard I applied myself, my maths would have let me down, because it's just not something I can do naturally. Now, words I can do no problem at all. But numbers. So there is. I would try and teach him to be a realist, Adrian. I think is that. I don't know if that's wrong of me, but that's how I feel.
I feel I have no brief as a non-parent to tell a brand new parent how to raise their child.
Hey, listen, you can tell me whatever you like. I don't listen to any of it.
I can tell. Finally, the truth is out.
Yes.
Well, to steer back to Paul Keaton, if I can call him Paul Keaton, I mean, even that term, one doesn't want to patronise him. I think he's actually very brave to go on camera. How much you could have. I struggle to imagine. Both of us have broadcast to thousands, if not millions. I can't hold in my head the concept of 1 million people. I don't know about you. So the fact there's, that you could broadcast to more than that, it just does my head in anyway. But to bring it back to Keaton, if heaven forbid that Frank was bullied, I'm going to guess that it's certainly not your first resort, or Angelina's first resort would be to put him on camera.
Exactly. I think you've hit the nail right on the head. And do you know the consequences of that is that something that you said to me actually when we were talking about this story, and you said, have you seen the other stories around it, which I hadn't at the time. And that's the problem with, we still have mainstream media, and the mainstream media is a beast, isn't it? And if once you wake that beast, there are consequences, aren't there? But you're right. I mean, that is the nail on the head for me. I think you're absolutely right. If you think, how are you going to be a parent? How are you going to be a father? I certainly wouldn't plaster my son's face all over social media. I think that's rule number one.
Although, to be fair, I believe, and it's hard to sort the wheat from the chaff on this story, as with all stories, but I believe he actually asked his mum to video him. But
so what? So what is your kid? Yeah. He's a kid,
yeah.
Do you know?
And you can't conceptualise going viral I can't.
And the people I know, there are so many people now who have 4 and 5 year olds who are deciding what they will do and what they won't do. I don't remember making a decision until I was about 16. Because, you know what I mean? Because I lived in my parents' house and I was my parents' child and they were the ones that were in charge, not me. It didn't matter what I wanted. I did what was good for me, determined and decided by my parents. That was it.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, Adrian, I've just looked at the clock and it's your bedtime.
And that has to be the end of the podcast then.
It does.
All I want to say in conclusion is rock on Norman Castle and good luck with parenting in the age of anxiety and social media.
I love it. Listen, if you've enjoyed listening to us witter on today, we've really enjoyed being here, haven't we? It's been great stuff. Loads of places you can see us. Both of our websites, actually, adrianlacey.com and shaneoconnor.net. If you want to look either of those up, you can find links to the podcast and all the rest of it. Shall I do the audio one this week? We're on Spreaker, Spreaker.com, and we're on iTunes. If you just go in and search for Bull and Specs, and it has to be the ampersand, as we say every week, because it just helps you find us a bit easier. But you can see the pictures as well, can't you? And in glorious, I was going to say glorious Technicolor, almost glorious Technicolor.
It's sort of pallid pink for me today.
Well, you are looking a bit pink.
Yeah, sorry about that. But yes, we're on YouTube, and again, it's the same deal, Bull and Specs, and the ampersand, which, as you reminded me last week, helpfully, is with your parenting skills freshly developed. It's above the 7 on your keyboard.
Oh, yeah, that's a good way of finding it now. Although I've moved all the buttons on my keyboard, or somebody has, I don't know who that was. So, listen, thanks for being with us. I don't know about you. I've got to go off and change a nappy.
I've got to change my own, yes. No, I didn't say that. You rotter.